My name is Louis Koplin. My maiden name was Ludwig Kopolovich, born July 30th, 1920, in a small town called NYLO in the area of Subcarpathia, which was part of the most eastern part of then known as Czechoslovakia. We were under the Czech rule for about 20 years until 1939, when we became Hungary. The town I was born in was a very small town with only practically was only a single street with shops on the main street, and people used to have their residences above their stores. Most of them were owned by Jewish people. The percentage of Jews in that small town amounted to about 40%. And as a matter of fact, during the Sabbath or during Jewish holidays, it affected the town's view completely because of that. And of course, as a result of that, the weekend consisted of 2 days of closed shops, and that was Saturday and Sunday. Oh, by the way, we were a family of 8. My father's name was Zalman or Zoltan.
Yeah.
My father was a shoemaker. My mother's name was Hedja. And the children were in order. I was the oldest. I was Leib Dubet or Louis David. And then came Lenka, then came Benzi, then came Rivka, then came Suri, and then came Eva. We lived in a house that consisted of 2 rooms. One was the living room, which also was used as a sleeping or bedroom, and the kitchen, which was a multi-purpose room, because not only were the meals prepared, but my father's workshop was in the kitchen.
Wow.
And at night, we had a certain table, a convertible table, which converted from a table into a bed to accommodate 8 people. The economy in general was not a booming one. It was not, most of the people were I would say, poor. Most of the Jewish people were tradesmen. They were the tailors, the shopkeepers, the shoemakers of the town. I myself attended elementary school after a while, we moved into a larger town. From Nelipen, I moved into Svaljevo. Svaljevo was a little bit larger town, and it did have a high school. And I attended the high school there. Not high school, I'm sorry, just an elementary school. In order to attend high school, I had to go to even a larger town, and that was called Mukachevo. And I commuted daily from my hometown to Mukachevo by train. It was about an hour ride, and my train usually left at 6:10 in the morning. And in order to get to the station, I had to walk, since there was no public transport. To my recollection, there was one car in the city, and there was a taxi. Other than that, of course, they had buses for community transportation. But other than that, there was absolutely no motorized transport. So I remember many times during a major snowstorm, I was the first one to make the threads to the station, and it was pretty difficult. It was almost about a mile away. But I did that for 8 years. And by the way, I attended a very unusual school called the Hebrew Gymnasium of Munkac, which was very well known and the only of its kind in Central Europe at the time. Life in general was, I'm looking back with great nostalgia, in spite of all the shortcomings economically. I never had, to my recollection, never had a toy. This was a place where winter was rather severe, and the winter sports were very, very important. And I never owned a pair of skates because I couldn't afford them, and certainly never owned a pair of skis. I eventually somehow, but whatever we did do is we used to take that tool that you uncovered, the rings on a wood-burning stove, and use that as a skating tool to get on the ice. And we had just as much fun. But anyway, by the age of 4 or 5, I attended Cheder. So that means by the age of 6, when elementary school started in general, I knew how to read and write, although in Hebrew. And that's where the Jewish population was ahead of the population in general, because it was completely ignorant. So anyway, after the elementary schooling, I passed an exam and I was accepted to that Hebrew Gymnasium in Munkac for an 8-year course, which I have done by train daily. The political situation kept deteriorating to a point where Czechoslovakia was broken up in 1939, and the Germans physically occupied what was formerly Moravia and Bohemia, Slovakia becoming independent, and that part of the country where I lived, Subcarpathia, became a part of Hungary. The rules in Hungary were such that when you became of military age, you had to report for military duty. And that's what happened to me. In 1940 or 41, I reported the first time, and they rejected me. Even though I was intended to go to slave labor, they rejected me because I was below weight and I was just so much undernourished. So I had a year of reprieve. And then the next year I did pass, and I was drafted into a military slave labor camp.
What year?
That was in 1943. 43, I got in. I had to get in.
How old were you in 1943?
In 1943, I was 23 years old. As I say, I was delayed, because of my weight and because of I was undernourished. It really delayed me from accepting me. Up to that point, by the way, the Hungarians initially, when they came in, they have permitted all the Jews that have lived there for more than 200 years or 100 years, I don't remember the date exactly, they had to prove that some of their ancestors lived in that area, because they wanted to get rid of any immigrants that have come in the past century or so. And I remember traveling to the mountains up to the Polish border to try to find some kind of an official transaction, such a deed or a birth certificate or something of the family. And eventually, by the way, I succeeded in finding to prove that the family was in the area for the past 100 years. And because of that, we were allowed to remain in Hungary, and in a relative peace, although with certain restrictions, economic restrictions. Jews could not work for the government. Jews could not hold government jobs or sensitive jobs. However, but they were left alone, and they were in no danger. And of course, while this was happening, the rest of Europe was already being slaughtered practically. As a matter of fact, we used to meet the trains coming from Slovakia in our hometown. The train used to stop, and we used to take food to them. But even under those circumstances, while even witnessing what was going on to a certain degree, by watching these trains go by and by the rumors that they had that they are killing Jews, we still didn't believe it's going to happen. I don't know if you remember, there was a movie made, Ship of Fools, and there are two Jewish passengers discussing the situation in Germany, and one Jewish guy tells the other, he says, "John, what are you worried about? Come on. There are 600,000 Jews in Germany. What are they going to do? Kill them all?" And just as unbelievable as it sounded then, it was exactly how we felt about that. Even to the last moment, while I have a video that I show when I make presentations, showing those people are waiting their fate in front of the crematoria, they still believe they're going to get a shower instead of being gassed. So as a result of that, we were kind of hoped that things are are just going to be okay, going to blow over. And besides, there was no way to get away. First of all, there was nowhere to go. Nobody would accept us. We were surrounded by countries that were mostly very anti-Semitic, and they had their own problems to deal with. Germany at the time, they certainly didn't want to deal with the Jewish question, so there was nowhere to go. And besides, I do not believe that my father or many of the other families could have rounded up enough money to buy a ticket to get anywhere. So we just stayed on. So in the meantime, I was drafted. So I was the first one to leave the family as a result of the Holocaust. And I reported at a town called Komárom, which is west of Budapest, on the Danube. And when I reported there, they lined us up the first day after we made our own. By the way, we had to make our own mattresses. How do you make your mattresses? They gave you the material, and you had to fill it up with straw. That's how you made your mattresses initially. But anyway, the first day or the second day, they lined us up. There must have been about 2,000 of us. And the guy...
All Jewish boys?
All about my age or younger. Mm-hmm. They were about 19, 20, 21. Mm-hmm. And they lined us up, and he gave the usual speech, the commander, about Arbeit macht frei. If you work hard, you'll be fine. If you don't, if you misbehave, you'll be mistreated. All that stuff. And then a few minutes later, he belted out another order, and he said, all shoemakers, one step forward. I look up and down the line, and there must have been 500 shoemakers step out. And of course, the reason, it's obvious. If you are going to be a shoemaker, you usually you don't work in the open, you work undercover, and chances are the conditions of your work will be much more acceptable, more pleasant. So of course I took a step forward, and the guys, the commander started marching down the line, and once in a while he stopped and chose a guy to take another step. And he chose, I remember, 3 or 4 or 5 carpenters, shoemakers, tailors, people that would be working at the headquarters, major military headquarters. And lo and behold, he comes to me and he says, "Step forward." As a result of that event, I spent 1943, 44, and beginning of 45 at the military headquarters, major Hungarian military headquarters in Komárom, in comfort, slept on a bed. I was fed 3 meals a day, while all the rest of them, the majority of them, were sent to the Russian front because Hungary was fighting on the side of Germany. And the statistics say that 95% of those perished, never came back. Because they sent them on the front without proper nourishment, without being properly outfitted. In Siberia, you can imagine, in the snow, to pick mines and do all the dirty work possible. And those kids never had a chance.
But why,
they all perished.
Why do you think he chose you? Do you know?
You know what the word muzzle means? You know what luck?
Yeah.
It's all luck.
Do you actually know how to make shoes?
Okay. No. Obviously, I was a student. My father was a shoemaker. I never sat down. Of course not. But what happened among the 4 shoemakers that he chose, or 5 shoemakers, there were about 2 of them real shoemakers. The rest of them were not shoemakers. So the guys, the real shoemakers, covered for us.
Yes.
You know, what were the job? The job were repairs, you know, like there was a hole, they could, you know, mend it. They was not making new shoes, it was just repair. It was easy, it was nothing. And everything was going fine. In 1945, as you know, Horthy, the head of the state of Hungary, decided this is a losing proposition. Hungary was losing tremendous amounts of manpower and resources, and he wanted out. So Germany said, "Oh, it's not that easy." And sure, and what they did is they just physically entered Hungary. Now, there are rumors that all along these years, you know, during from 41 on through 45, the Germans tried to convince the Hungarians to cooperate in their final solution, and they resisted it. And I'm sure that must be the case. So even though when the Germans did come in and there were some very Nazi groups, Hungarian groups, which participated in this final solution, because what happened in 1945, within 2 months of occupation, they rounded up and killed 500,000 Jews.
Including your family?
And that's the time, it was a Passover of 1945. Now this has all been unbeknown to me. I have no idea what's happening. I have
You
no,
don't have any
we had not at the later years. The beginning I had communication, but later on I had no idea what was happening. But we had an inkling that must have been happening because the Komárom community was being rounded up too, even though I didn't witness it. But anyway, what happened is that they came in to the house and they rounded them up and took them to Munkács, where I attended school. They put them in a brick factory for a couple of weeks, and then they just shipped them all to Auschwitz. Now, what happened there was all second-hand. I was not privy to it. And that's why I have this. There's an item called, I think you ought to look it up. It describes exactly what happened to a transport that came from Subcarpathia to Auschwitz. The description, point by point description, what happened to them. And it's called the Auschwitz album. Please look it up. It's available to anybody on the internet. And when I make presentations, I show that because, as I said, I was not witness it. All I know that when they got there, my mother or any mother with small children were herded to one side right away, and of course an elderly or disabled were also. So the only one that managed to escape, at least for a while, was my brother, my sister, and Rivka. She was must have been about 15, 14, slender, little, beautiful little kid. So, and Lenke took care of her but she lasted only a couple months because there were inspections every day. They lined them up and lined them and inspected them. So if you couldn't stand or you looked too weak, they just took them away day after day. So eventually she perished a few weeks later. So the only one that survived in that event was my father, my brother, and Lenke, the two oldest, and my father. Now my father was in camp with my brother. I'll come to this a little later. What eventually happened, they got separated. He ended up in Buchenwald, and he died a week after liberation from typhus.
Your father?
The father. But Bernie survived, Lenke survived. Now, I'm going to tell you the story how I found them. Now, after the Germans entered the country, we were released. The commander made a statement, says, "You guys, you're free. We don't follow, you're not in captivity anymore." Where do I go? What do I do? There were rumors that there were some passports, or not passports, visas, available in Budapest from the Vatican, from Swiss, Sweden. So where do you go? It's only an hour ride, to Budapest. So I took a train, went to Budapest.
Why were you wanting the passports? What did you think you were going to do with them?
No, these are visas. So once you get a visa
Yeah.
of a foreign country, then you are protected because you're not a Jew.
Oh.
You become Catholic, or you become
I see.
a Swiss.
So they were false identities.
Yeah, actually, yeah. In other words, if you have a visa, the Germans didn't touch you because, these were all neutral places. So what happened is that when I got to Budapest, I really didn't know where to go. I wandered around with another couple of fellows. And one day we were just, walking around, just arrested by patrol. And of course they took us into a camp, and they made us drop our pants. And of course the moment you are circumcised, because in Europe nobody's circumcised except for Jews, and they just automatically put us into a line of, marching line of hundreds and hundreds of other people that they rounded up, and they put us on a train, on a cattle car train, and took us to the Austro-Hungarian border. Now, what happened in the meantime, you have to remember, this is early 45. Russians are knocking on their doors. They are almost around, not far from Budapest. You could hear, as a matter of fact, I could hear cannon fire while I was in Budapest. But because they didn't march that fast, it takes time. But anyway, they took us to the border of Austria to dig, what do they call it, ditches, not ditches, but tank,
Trenches.
whatchamacallit, what do you call it?
Trenches?
Trenches, against the onslaught of the Russian army. And that's when my real experience started. They didn't feed us. They made us sleep in tents. It was started to get cold.
What were you wearing?
W-
Did you have warm clothes to keep you, or did you not have?
I had a coat, my father's coat. I had a pair of shoes that my father, boots like shoes, you know, they came up to you. They saved my life. I'm positive.
Mm-hmm.
I never took those shoes for years.
Did you wear them when you slept?
Of course. My God, you take them off if somebody will
Somebody
take.
will
No. You never change your underwear. Nothing for a month. Nothing. Oh my God, no. I'm sure this helped. I had an overcoat. And finally, the Russians were approaching, and they put us on the end of, the middle, not the end. It must have been December somewhere or January, I don't recall. They put us on a train again and took us into Austria. And that was the beginning of what we all know of as the Death March. They herded all the surviving people, Jews, from the various concentration camps in the east. They were all being herded into Austria. And this is what they called the Death March. And I walked from Vienna all the way to Salzburg. To Linz. This is around Salzburg. And ended up in Mauthausen. This is the month of January, February, March, during snowstorms. We slept sometimes in some kind of a cover. Most of the time they made us sleep just where we were, lie down. And anybody who couldn't get up in the morning, they just went around with a gun and shot everybody. And days went by and they never fed us, nothing, anything. No water, no food, nothing. And then once in a while we were surprised and they fed us. They gave us some hot soup or something.
What was your emotional state like during that time?
Emotional state was that I gotta live, I gotta keep going. I never for a moment, I don't ever recall during all those really terrible times that I am not going to make that. Mm-hmm. Never. I remember reaching the Alps and making a turn, and suddenly the first view of the Alpen peaks appeared. It was a sunshine and the ice, the snow was on its cover. It was so gorgeous, it was so beautiful. And I tell my fellow marcher, he says, "Look, isn't this beautiful?" Mm-hmm. And he looks at me and says, "You must be insane." So, you see, so this is what kept me going. I never for a moment thought that I would not make it. And believe me, I was so hungry.
Yeah.
Oh my God. It was, we used to run into the fields and pick some kohlrabi left over from in the farmers. I always had a saving angel with me. I had a guy from my hometown who I did not even go to school with. He was just a plain guy. And he was a big guy. And every time he ran into the field, he got two of them. So he gave me one, shared it with me. Birnbaum was his name. And I never knew what happened to him. And he did that for me for days. And he helped me. And he wasn't even my friend. He was just from the hometown. So you see, and I remember being in another place before the march. Also, there was a girl, I think she may have slept with the commander of the camp. And she just appeared among us once in a while. I don't know, she just, and once in a while she brought me something, handed me something. I don't know, just
Did you ever think
The
about?
only, people ask me, well, didn't the Germans, the only act of kindness in all my experiences was that during the death march, they had to hire older, very old people for guards because they ran out of manpower. I mean, they were just killing them. And an old man was marching next to me, and he kind of touched my arm, and he handed me a hot boiled potato. And I looked at him. It was so strange. And it's the only kindness of all, We went and walked through towns and villages, and the Germans looked at us with such anger and meanness, just like the epidemic was walking by.
And when you finally got to this camp,
Finally, we ended up in Mauthausen, and I remember getting into that open place, and I had the first sight of crematoria. You could see them, there's ovens, and they pointed out. By the way, we walked through the city of Linz, and I remember seeing a big sign, and it said, "The biggest warmonger of them all is dead. Let's march on to victory." It was when Mr. Roosevelt, President Roosevelt died. And I said to the guy, "Look at this, Roosevelt died." That's how I found out that he died. That was in Linz. It was very interesting. So anyway, when we got into the camp, the camp, Mauthausen itself. By the way, all these people, I was going to tell you, I was going to come back to the fact about being together. During the death march, every time we came to a crossroad, there were people coming by the thousands, merging with that main bunch. And I feel, you feel guilty about this, but I always hoped, please, let it not be a brother or sister. Now, why would anybody, you would want, you want them to be, because my brother tells me, and I knew that, because I witnessed it myself, that when he was with his father in the camp in Auschwitz, what happened, he kept pushing part of his ration to his son, to Bernie. And he kept saying, "Listen, you are 15 years old. You have a future. I already lived. I'm 45 years old. Please have a bigger piece." And he kept pushing. He didn't want to, "Dad, I want you to live too." And as you can imagine, the survival in a case like that, and I witnessed it in the tents where I was living, where the same situation occurred. Your chances of survival dropped tremendously. You could not cope. And my brother tells me when they separated, it was such a relief. So... Anyway, we got in there, and the camp was so loaded that they created an extension called Ginskirchen. It was a temporary big barracks built adjacent to Mauthausen. And all it was a big space, and we just lied there on the floor. And again, there was no feeding, there was no organized, not anything. And I was there for, I don't remember, 2-3 weeks. And people you didn't know who was dead, who was alive. Thousands of us. Men, women, this time they didn't even separate. It was just awful. And finally, May 9th or May 8th, his birthday, came around, and suddenly there were some shouts. He says, "The Americans are here." And we decided to, it was night. No, we better not go at night, nowhere to go. Let's wait till the morning. And a couple of guys are also from my hometown. And in the morning we left the camp and we got out of I remember getting out of the gate and didn't know whether to turn right or left. But we noticed lightning on the left, so, well, obviously they must be fighting. So let's go to the right. And we got on the road to Linz, back to Linz. And after about 5 minutes, a patrol stops up, and it was an American patrol. And he stops, he says, who are you? And I told him who we were. And you know, it was a black unit. I have never seen a black person in my life. And you know, it didn't
faze you at all.
Didn't faze.
Did you speak
Never
English
questioned
with them?
it. Pardon?
What language did you speak with them?
Oh, English. You see, as a matter of fact, the guys kind of stuck with me because I spoke some English, you see. So they wanted to come with me. Because I learned it in the gymnasium. I learned it, yeah. And we identified ourselves, and he says, just keep going, and you will have all the food there, all you want, you know, it was all set up and everything. And after we marched, I remember coming to the first house. And we were so hungry, we couldn't wait to get into the city. And we said, maybe we have to stop, maybe they'll give us a piece of bread or something. And I knocked on the door, and a lady, an old lady, shaking and terrified, horrified, opened the door. And I said beautifully, nicely in German, bitte schön, kann ich ein Stückchen Brot haben? Please, could I have a piece of bread? You know, we could have taken a stone and hit her or killed. No, all I want is a piece. And she went in and brought out a piece of bread. So anyway, coming back to the blacks, you know, it never dawned on me that they're any different, that there's something unusual about them. Who are these people? Until I started running out into white guys. And they started saying, oh, that niggers, those, you know, started telling me that they are different, that they are, you know. So you see, that's what prejudice is not something you're born with, you're taught, you know. I mean, I didn't think they were any different, they were Americans.
So did you end up in some sort of war displacement persons camp?
No, wait, this is, the story is...
Just to clarify, this is the town of Wells that you're walking to. Not Linz, Wells.
No, not there, Wells, yeah. City of Wells.
How did you look at this? Like, how were you dressed? Like, how did you appear to the people that you were encountering now that you're walking away?
Or did everybody look?
Like, do you remember, were you wearing the same jacket and boots? Were you
At that time I still have the same outfit on.
Were you very, very skinny?
I was 60 pounds or something.
Oh my God.
Wait, I'll tell you what happened to me. So anyway, we got into the city, and I mean, you know, American soldiers, there were stations set up with food, and it was free for all, you know. And the Russians, you know, remember, not only were we liberated, but they were Russian prisoners of war, French prisoners of war. I mean, this mass of millions of people on the go, liberated. And believe me, when they knocked on the door, they knocked everybody out. There was a lot of killing. If they saw a guy with any semblance of a uniform, they just killed him, and it was havoc. And they let the Russians, so you know, against the population. And there was a lot of raping and everything else going on. But for a while, but later on they established order, and you couldn't do that. But anyway, we acquisitioned a house. It was an empty house, and we took it to be ours. And now we had to go out and get provisions, you know. And sure enough, we brought in all kinds of stuff in various places, canned food and whatever food was available. And we acquired some furniture, so because we didn't know what's going to be. But anyway, about no more than a week, and I passed out somewhere, just passed out. And what happened, I had typhus, like, they have to remember, one thing that really was killing us were the lice. We were so infested with lice, and there was no way to get rid of them. Oh my God. And the first thing we did when we got into wells, they DDT sprayed us. That was the first thing that the soldiers did. But by that time I must have been infected already, because that's how the disease spread between one victim to the other.
Via mosquito.
Pardon?
Typhus is spread by mosquito, right?
No, the lice. And
Didn't
there
they,
was no
pour
way.
the powder over you?
Yeah, no, they had guns, were spraying, you know, were turning on, and that's the way we got rid of them. And then they gave us haircuts, by the way, too. That helped, you know, because we didn't have haircuts for a month. And the lice was so easily spread because the heads were next to each other. It was easy. And you know, you couldn't spare any blood, and they were sucking it away. I was 60 pounds or something. But anyway, I passed out.
Yeah.
And for the next 2 months, I have no idea what happened to me. Allegedly, I was taken to a military field hospital. And I imagine most of the victims.
Were there cures for typhus? If you could just, you'd hydrated and all that?
I have no idea. I don't know what happened to me. I imagine I must have done something. I don't know what they did.
Yeah.
But many of them didn't make it. And like my father, he passed away. And I did. And then somehow I woke up in June or July, I don't know. And I felt strong enough, and we decided now we have to go and find out what happened to my family.
Were you still
Now-
in Wells?
Pardon?
Were you still in Wells?
It's still in Wells, yes. It was right, the military hospital was right outside there. It was a former German Air Force base, yeah. And I remember having stacked beds, you know. And I remember one time a Jewish officer visited me. It's the only remembrance I have out of the whole ordeal. And I said, will you come back, please? He was so nice to me. He said, I promise I'll come back. I never remember he ever come back. But he was a Jewish doctor, you know. It was so comforting, I remember.
Had you lost track of the other people that you'd been walking with?
Oh, lost all the time, lost
Yeah.
track.
Yeah.
I ran into guys who were my friends when I was a kid, and I saw him dying. I knew he wouldn't make it to the next day. So many of them. Oh my God. And think of a few in particular.
Okay, so you went to go look for your family.
Family. Now, how do you do that? What happened is that UNRWA, the joint, particularly the joint for the Jews, set up feeding stations all over Europe, particularly in the capitals. So what we did is we traveled from one capital to the other, hoping to run into someone who would tell me, hey, I see your brother, I see your sister here and there. And then you read the walls.
Lists.
Wherever there was any space, there were millions of names. So you did that.
Those were scraps of paper left by people,
By the
not official lists.
No, these are people leaving. And there were always rumors. I heard in Budapest one time that my brother was in Bucharest, and in Bucharest I heard he was in Prague, you know. And by the way, to get on a train you didn't need a ticket, nothing, because there were millions of people on the move, back and forth and back and forth. I don't think they ever asked for a ticket, but the trains were running. The military made sure that the trains were running. But anyway, one day, I'm on my way from Prague to Budapest, because I heard a rumor that my brother was in Budapest. I get on the train, and you know, they have those compartments. And I get on the hallway and looking for a place to sit. Find a compartment empty. I get in, and I want to sit down, and the bench is all dirty, muddy. So I look around and pick up a piece of paper to wipe it. And as I pick up the paper, my sister's name appeared on the heading. And guess what?
What?
I was telling this story like I'm telling it to you, and I was thinking, this could not happen. I made this up. One day, this guy sends me an email, a copy of that page. He found it. Not that
Sure.
paper,
Yeah,
but
that
a copy
paper.
with her name, with a list of surviving victims of the Holocaust sent to Sweden for medical recuperation. And she was listed like that.
And it was printed in the newspaper.
No, it was a pamphlet. It was a newspaper, kind of a, I don't know.
It was a newspaper,
Yeah.
probably meant to help people.
Yes, yes. Can you believe that? So first thing I did is the first stop. I went back to Prague because Budapest being being
Occupied.
occupied city, nothing worked. But Prague being a liberated city, everything worked: telephone, telegraph. And I sent a telegram to the Swedish Red Cross, asking about Lenka. Within 24 hours I had an answer. And that's how she found out about me. Now, can you believe this?
And what about your brother, Bernie?
That's another story. So I got a hold of her. She asked me about Bernie. I said, I don't know. I didn't know yet. I finally found out about him, that he was at home in Russia. He went back home to my hometown. And sure enough, as much as I didn't want to go back. I just didn't want, first of all, the idea of going into Russia. By the way, that part of the country, which was formerly Czechoslovakia and then Hungary, now, after the war, by a pact with Beneš and Stalin, it became Russia. Now, this is the last place I wanted to go. There were many reasons for that. First of all, you know, the Russians were victims just like we were. I mean, they lost millions and millions of dollars of manpower, lives, and their feeling about the Jewish experience obviously lacked the sympathy that the Americans showed, because they were victims themselves. You know, they were just you know. So I didn't blame them, but on the other hand, I really didn't want to go back, but I said, I gotta meet my brother. So sure enough, I was walking from the town that we lived in to the town where I was born, and I remember making a certain turn, and he was coming, and over a bridge there we met. It was awesome.
So how did you get from there to the U.S.?
It's another miracle. After we decided we don't want to stay in Russia, But what I did a couple things. First of all, I wanted to get a birth certificate. And I walked into the city hall. By the way, he just sent me a picture of the city hall from 1934, which was such a delight. And he finds things that are just
That's
awesome.
the one car in town.
And he says, I'm sorry I can't give you a birth certificate because we don't have the forms yet, because they just took over the Russian. So the other guys in the next desk says, well, why don't you use the old Hungarian forms? So here I have a Hungarian printed form with Russian information entered and then translated into Czech. So you ask me, what year was I born? And you don't believe I'm 93. Well, maybe I'm not. Because I don't know, all this mishmash, maybe they made a mistake. I don't know.
You're 65.
There you go. So anyway, I got that. And then there was another thing. Since I finished the gymnasium, I was a graduate of the Hebrew Gymnasium, I would have wanted to get some kind of a proof that I finished high school. I don't know why. I had no idea that I would ever continue or anything, but it was an inkling, it was just an idea. I ran into someone who had a yearbook. And based on that yearbook, I then ended up in Prague, and I entered the Charles University of Prague Medical School. They accepted me. And they gave me a certificate, Ludwig Kopolovich, properly enrolled student in the medical profession, and I got a proof, right? Well, I had to leave Czechoslovakia after a while, because whatever reason, there was a reason. I ended up...
What was the reason?
The reason was that the Russians demanded their former residents of Subcarpathia to return to Subcarpathia and forced the Czechs to expel them. And again, I didn't want to go there. So we just took off one night, illegally. There was that secret train, Zionist train. We met someone, and they created these groups, which they led in the night. We crossed the border from Czechoslovakia to Germany. Can you imagine to be wanting to go back to Germany? This is insane. But to go to displaced persons camp, because that was the outlet to go anywhere else in the world, including Palestine. So this was this underground railroad that they talk about.
I'd like to know more about that, Steve. Maybe you can.
And I remember meeting secretly, a group of us were then given instructions how to where to get on, where to get off, and then when night set in, we walked through the forest and crossed the border. And we were led by someone, and we heard shots, and we were terrified, but it was all paid, it was all, taken care of. And that's how I ended up back into Germany, and we entered a displaced persons camp.
Where?
It was around Munich. And the next day or 2 days later, we were walking on the grounds, and with me, and now I have kids that attended the same high school as I did. And we are speaking English because we want to, kind of sharpen our language ability. But anyway, and an officer goes by, and he says, hey, fellows, you speak English? I said, yes, a little bit. He says, how would you like to work for the Joint? He said, what does that mean? He says, well, you'll be given officers' uniforms. Each one of you will have a jeep. None of us know how to drive. And you live in officers' quarters. And this is at the military headquarters. It sounded out of this world. Officers, of course. Sure enough, we were hired by the Joint. We were given officers' uniforms. The lapel said AJDC, American Joint Distribution Committee, and most of the soldiers saw there was a big rank. There was a major, and every soldier who went by saluted. It was so embarrassing.
Was your sister and your brother with you at that time?
You see me
Yeah.
there?
Adorable.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were given this position of authority.
And we were given jeeps. We learned how to drive. We lived in apartments. I ate. I had breakfast, lunch, and dinner. The table next to General Eisenhower in Frankfurt, at the what is that?
Partenkirchen.
What? Farben.
Garmisch-Partenkirchen.
Yeah. It's just unbelievable, unbelievable. I mean, this was from going from the bottom of the hell, from damnation to, I mean, this is, you're talking about, you asked about luck. Do you hear now the thread about the luck?
Is
It's always luck.
that how you felt about it in the moment? Did you feel like it was luck, or did you?
I don't give it a thought until you ask me.
Yeah.
Not until you ask me, I didn't give it any thought why it happened.
You just were moving forward and just.
Yeah, it just happened. It's
Yeah.
and I always think I'm saying, hey, I'm pretty lucky. So, all right. One day, he comes up to us. He says, this officer who befriended us, Joe Fink. We went to visit him in LA. You remember that?
He lived in Laurel.
Yeah, lived in Laurel Canyon.
He worked at the Rand Corporation.
Yeah, he worked for the Rand Corporation.
Is he still alive?
No, he died. Oh, what a guy. He loved me. He just, oh my God. And what he says, how would you like to continue your education one day? That was the last thing we thought of. He says, look, it's not for sure, but there are about 70 scholarships available by B'nai B'rith International or something. And he says, let me give it a try. And, if you can't make it. So the only proof we submitted were the proofs that I just described to you. Each one of us was enrolled at the Charles University. And after about 6 months, he stops us. He says, you guys better start packing. So I said, why? Where are we going? He says, remember he invited us to the office, and he says, I've got 3 scholarships. One is for California, one is Texas, and one is Wisconsin. Where do you guys want to go? None of us had any idea about these states, never heard of them. So he says, well, I guess you want to decide. Why don't we draw? And I drew Wisconsin.
Right. The worst.
During this time that you were working for the Joint, you were asked to do some interesting things.
Oh my God.
Were refugees still?
While we worked for the Joint, remember the Kielce pogrom? In 1946, spring, many of the Jews returned to Poland, thinking that they can pick up where they left off, and coming back to the villages and towns claiming their houses and their properties. And there was a city called Kielce. And a bunch of them came in the same time, wanted to get their houses back. And they killed 50 or 60 Jews that night. As a result of that event, thousands, hundreds of thousands, whoever thought that they could come back again, decided they are leaving. And the United States was involved in this project of rescue. They provided transportation from the Austrian border into displaced persons camps. And we, the three of us, those guys that you see here, all we worked on that project. We met the trains at the border of Austria and accompanied them with military orders to a destination that they decided on. So we took them there, unloaded, went back to the border, another transport, another. We did that for a whole year.
What about the one train that everybody?
Oh my God. You know, they started running out of places to put them. And there was a case where they intended to put them into a previous concentration camp. And there's, I don't know, somebody must have been stupid because they never even removed the guard houses or the lights or the barbed wire. And when the train got there and those people saw that setup, I don't blame them. They did not want to get off the train. Now, remember, there are 2,000-3,000 people on here. And it became a real issue because they had to call the General McNarney, I think was his name, was the head of the military at that time of the occupational forces. He personally had to come out there to resolve the issue. But in the meantime, we tried to convince them. So each one of us using our own language. I remember making a speech on a microphone to all the people, telling them, look, this is all coming down. This was just a concentration camp before. This is not going to be a concentration camp again. And they would not get off. And eventually what happened, the train had to pull away. They just wouldn't go. So this is the kind of work we did. By the way, did I tell you the story about how I got to Madison? I didn't tell you. All right. When I got the scholarship, they gave us a schedule and how to proceed. We got to Hamburg, I remember. There was the place of the embarkation, of the demarcation, and they put us on a ship. It was one of those Ernie Pyle.
The USS
Ernie Pyle was the name of the boat, which was a military transport. Sleeping in haystacks, you know. It was so much fun. Oh, we were so happy. Well, anyway, and they gave us instructions how to get off when we get off the boat, we take the pacemaker to Chicago, and from Chicago there was a train to Madison at that time. And then I was to report to a fellow by the name of Rabbi Hillel, a rabbi of the Hillel Foundation, and he, and well, anyway, I got settled, and I met my first advisor. And he says to me, well, you got to have a major. And so I said, the major, what's a major? So he says, well, he explained what a major is. And so I said, well, I was in medical school. He says, no, hold it. You got to get a bachelor's degree first before you can go to medical school. Well, in Europe, you know, you go from gymnasium directly into graduate studies. And so he says, well, what should we do? He says, how about pharmacy? And pharmacy rang a most pleasant bell because because pharmacy in Europe, you have no idea position of the
Yeah,
pharmacist.
it's a big deal.
This is,
They're like doctors.
it's like, and not only that they're doctors, I mean, the owning a pharmacy is an inherited right. You cannot open a pharmacy without government approval. First of all, they have to establish enough economic support. You cannot have a pharmacy that fails in Europe. So they ration their permits for pharmacies. And he was considered top, Pancho in the town, like the doctor, the lawyer, the pharmacist. And that's how I ended up. Now, what was your other question?
How you met Lorraine?
Oh, Lorraine. Well, as I said, I made most of my friends I made in Madison, of course. And when I graduated,
You
I-
were also in the Jewish fraternity.
oh yeah, by the way, I was accepted by the API. Yes, and I lived there in the house. The scholarship, by the way, covered me for room and board, for everything. This is amazing. This is just, again, you see, Rosie, one muscle. How does this happen?
Many of your frat mates were from Milwaukee, right?
Yeah, oh my God,
They-
yes. I know some leading citizens here in town. Oh, sure. As a matter of fact, when it was time, after I graduated and I did my internship, you have to take an exam to be able to practice. And they wouldn't let me because I was not a citizen. I don't know, some crazy thing. And because I came on a student visa by a non, I didn't belong to any country. I don't know where they would have shipped me. But anyway, because I was on displaced persons camp. I'm a displaced person. And so what happened, and I was in panic. So I went to Kritzek, I remember, says, could you help me with it? And he called Senator Wiley. Remember Wiley?
Sure.
He was in office forever. And how many times is your name in the congressional records?
Twice.
This twice?
Yeah.
What?
When I was.
You are the first one. My name is twice.
Hey.
How much is yours, Nick?
Nothing.
See?
Me either.
One, he brought up a bill with my name on it. Hear ya,
Yeah.
to change my status from temporary to permanent. Number two, I told you there were 70 scholarships. One of them, of those recipients, was Senator Thomas Lantos.
Oh, yeah.
And about when Lorraine, just
So
before,
he's the one that went to California?
Yeah.
Wow.
in 19,
No, he wasn't one of the three.
He wasn't one of the three,
No,
but
no,
he had
those were
one.
his personal friends.
Got it, okay.
no, he was not a
One of
friend,
the-
but he was on that program. So he tried to get all the recipients of that program to come to be his guests in Washington. And it was, Lorraine, I remember, was still alive. And she was so excited that she would be coming. And of course, she passed away in the meantime. So, you know who came with me? Stephen and Eugene.
Oh,
We went to that event. Remember that? And we were guests of Thomas Lantos. Remember that? In the Congress, they showed us where
A private tour, a
Private-
Capitol,
and everything. I mean, it was just.
sat in the
And-
the Senate chambers.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, and also the names of all the participants were listed on the congressional record. So that's second time. All right. Now, so all my friends I made were in college, and I moved to Milwaukee. And who fixed me up?
It was a blind date.
Who?
It was a blind date.
Blind date. It was a blind date. And let's see now, who fixed me up? It was one of the one of the friends fixed me up, and I remember his name.
Oh, did you meet? You met Lorraine, and then she introduced you. Then you met my mom, and my mom wasn't
Your
married.
mom was married.
Was married.
Yes.
Oh, because this was the second thing, the second marriage.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Uh-huh.
And she didn't like me.
Why?
Because come on.
You didn't have a pot to piss in.
I didn't have a pot to pee in. I didn't have, who is he? We don't know where he comes from, who his parents are, oh my God. She was very upset. She was very, and Lorraine fell in love with me. She loved me. And Barbara too. She was kind of sour on, she said, who is this guy? This poor, nothing, has nothing, no name, no nothing.
How about Lorraine's parents?
Grandma and grandpa.
Grandma and grandpa. How did they?
Grandma, grandpa, at least I didn't get any vibes from them. But Lucille,
That's her precious sister.
she was always very class conscious, and I had no class,
I still have none. So,
Poor little druggist.
but you got married, and then
And did you ever see that movie of our marriage? There's an old movie. It's all broken up, where everybody is there. All your grandparents, everybody's still there. We got married at the house on Lake Drive on a Thursday, and then we went up north for honeymoon.
They met in '54. I was married. I was born in '55.
And he was born in '55. We did it bang, bang, bang.
that's the way it should be.